Welcome to Learning English with Common Ground International. I'm Misty Davidson. I'm an ESL teacher here, and I'm glad you decided to join us. Our lesson today is avoiding double negatives in English. You can see it says, I didn't see nothing. You will learn why that's incorrect and how to make it correct. Our objective today, by the end of the lesson, you will recognize double negatives in English. You will also learn how to avoid them and how to express negatives correctly. What are double negatives? Double negatives are sentences with a negative verb and another negative word or expression. They're sentences with two negatives. One is always a verb, one is another negative word. Now, many languages use double negatives and they're fine. For example, in Spanish, you can say no sé nada, I don't know anything, or literally I don't know nothing. That's correct in Spanish. Many languages have that, and that's perfectly correct, but in English, double negatives are never correct. In English, a double negative actually means an affirmative. It's like math. We know that in math, -5 times -5 is a positive 25. In English, a double negative actually means an affirmative. Now, you may say, well, I've heard English speakers use double negatives, and that's right. There are many native speakers of English who do use double negatives, but it's incorrect English. Maybe they don't know better, but you do, so you won't have to use them anymore. In English, you can only have one negative in a sentence. If the verb is negative, you can't use another negative word. If the verb is affirmative, then a negative word is fine. Let's look at some common negative words. Don't. I don't like this. Doesn't. He doesn't like this. Am not. I am not from Argentina. Isn't. Wasn't. Weren't. Can't. Couldn't. Wouldn't. Shouldn't. And won't. You probably know these words. I don't know where my book is. He wasn't at work today. These are sentences with negative verbs. They're good, correct sentences. Now, some other negative words that are not verbs. No, not, or apostrophe T. None, no one, nobody, nothing, nowhere, neither, never. These could be adverbs, pronouns. They're negative words, they're not verbs. Nobody admitted to causing the accident. There wasn't anybody who said it was my fault. Nobody admitted it. Perfectly good sentence. The verb is affirmative, but there's a negative word. Neither of my neighbors has a dog. There's a negative word, an affirmative verb. Perfectly good sentence. Some additional negative words. Barely, hardly, and scarcely. These words all mean the same thing. They mean very little. I barely have time to eat. I'm so busy. That means I have very little time because I'm very busy. It's a negative word. Now, one more negative word that you may have heard in English. You may have heard native speakers use the word ain't as a negative word, meaning am not or is not or are not. In reality, ain't is not a word. It's never correct English. Now, what happens if you really do need two negatives? Sometimes you do to get the meaning that you want. Sometimes a sentence already has a negative verb, but you still need another negative word to make the sentence mean what you want. Here's how you do it and do it correctly. You can leave the verb in the negative, but for every no in the negative word, substitute any. Let's look at some examples. No or any. You don't say, I don't have no ice cream, I don't have any ice cream. No one can become anyone in the affirmative. Nothing can become anything. Nowhere can become anywhere. Nobody can become anybody. You'll see examples of all of these. I'm going to show you some example sentences with the incorrect, he doesn't know nothing, and then corrected, he doesn't know anything. Nothing becomes anything. Now watch this. He knows nothing. If you really want to use nothing, you can, but don't use a negative verb. Put no in the affirmative. Instead of he doesn't know, he knows. He doesn't know anything or he knows nothing means the same thing. She didn't want no ice cream. Incorrect. She didn't want any ice cream. Or if I wanted to have no, how would I make it correct? You got it. Make it affirmative. She wanted no ice cream. I'm broke means I have no money. So I'm not going nowhere on vacation. I'm broke, so I'm not going anywhere on vacation. Now, if I want the verb to be affirmative, I'm broke, so I'm going nowhere on vacation. I didn't know no one at the party. I didn't know anyone at the party. What if I want to use an affirmative verb? Then I can say, I knew no one at the party. I haven't seen none of his family is incorrect. I haven't seen any of his family, or I've seen none of his family. Affirmative verb, negative word. I drove to my friend's house, but there wasn't nobody home. I drove to my friend's house, but there wasn't anybody home. Or I drove to my friend's house, but there was, affirmative, nobody home. He couldn't never find his glasses. Never is a negative word. Ever is the affirmative of never. He couldn't ever find his glasses, or he could never find his glasses. They won't like neither of the choices is incorrect. They won't like either of the choices. Either is the affirmative of neither, or they will like neither of the choices. Some other examples. I can't barely read this. To make it correct, we say, I can barely read this. It doesn't hardly ever rain in the desert. To make it correct, we say, it hardly ever rains in the desert. He doesn't scarcely make enough to live on. To say that correctly, he scarcely makes enough money to live on. We ain't been to work in a week. We can say, we haven't been to work in a week. Okay, we've talked a lot about double negatives, and you may say, well, even if my friends don't use double negatives, I hear them in the media. There are many double negatives in songs. If you listen to popular songs on the radio, you're going to hear many double negatives. For example, the Rolling Stones said, I can't get no satisfaction. I'm not going to sing that to you, but that's a line in the song, I can't get no satisfaction. We don't need no education. Pink Floyd sang that. We don't need no school control. And finally, ain't no sunshine when she's gone. These are all things that you hear on the radio, in songs, and you know what? It's okay in a popular song. Not okay in conversation. It is okay in a popular song. Some people like to use double negatives with their friends just for emphasis or to be hip, to be really cool. They think it's cool, and you could do that if you want to with your friends, but be careful. Don't use double negatives with your boss or with a client. They might get the wrong impression. They might think that you don't know English very well. So let's practice. You will see a sentence with a double negative. Correct the sentence. There may be more than one way to say the sentence correctly. I'll give you both ways, or more than one way. Let's begin. You shouldn't never drive too fast. Spelled too wrong. I should know better. T-O-O fast. T-double-O fast. You should say, you shouldn't ever drive too fast, or you should never drive too fast. Look at the next one. I don't have no money, so I'm not buying nothing today. Number of ways you can do this. I don't have any money, so I'm not buying anything today. Is there anything else you can do? Since there are two double negatives, you can do a lot of things. I have no money, so I'm buying nothing today. Can you do it any other way? I don't have this written down, but you can say, I have no money, so I'm not buying anything today. Or I don't have any money, so I'm buying nothing today. He didn't know nobody at the party, so he left early. You can do this two ways. He didn't know anybody at the party, so he left early. Or he knew nobody at the party, so he left early. She speaks so softly that I can't barely hear her. There's only one way to fix this sentence. She speaks so softly that I can barely hear her. Can't is negative, barely is negative. He doesn't know nothing about the robbery because he didn't see no one enter the building. There are a lot of things you can do with this. I'll give you a chance. He doesn't know anything about the robbery because he didn't see anyone enter the building. There are three other ways we can do this. Let's see if you said this. He knows nothing about the robbery because he saw no one enter the building. He doesn't know anything about the robbery because he saw no one enter the building. He knows nothing about the robbery because he didn't see anyone enter the building. Yeah, that was a tricky one. He isn't never home when I call him. He isn't ever home when I call him. Or, he is never home when I call him. I wouldn't drink no alcohol if I were you. I wouldn't drink any alcohol if I were you, or I would drink no alcohol if I were you. Okay, you can do several things with this. There ain't no point in getting upset. You can't change nothing. There is no point in getting upset. You can't change anything, or there isn't any point in getting upset. You can change nothing. Or there's no point in getting upset, you can change nothing. Or there isn't any point in getting upset, you can't change anything. You can do 4 different things with that. I wasn't nowhere near where the accident happened. I wasn't anywhere near where the accident happened. And I was nowhere near where the accident happened. They had bad seats at the play, so they couldn't see nothing. They had bad seats at the play, so they couldn't see anything. Or they had bad seats in the play, so they could see nothing. I hope you did well in the practice. Let's do some reviewing. Let's review. To review, double negatives in English are sentences with a negative verb and another negative word. Double negatives are not allowed in English. If a verb is negative, you can't use another negative word. If a verb is affirmative, it's okay to use a negative word. You can substitute any for no to make the negative word affirmative. Many popular songs do use double negatives. Many English speakers also use double negatives, but they are incorrect in English. So hopefully you won't use them. You know better now. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you learned a lot about double negatives and how to avoid them. I'm Misty Davidson from Common Ground International. Thank you for being part of our day today. Hope to see you again soon, and goodbye.